Hey guys, welcome to episode 7 of Beyond the Weight Room podcast. Today we have Alan Tran, who is the executive chef and dietitian for the Red Sox. Thanks for joining us, Alan.
Yeah.
Um, Me and Alan worked together with U.S. ski team for a long time, got to travel around and see weird places of the world and had a lot of interesting times, we'll say, along the way. So it's going to be good catching up with you. Are you getting ready for me and actually Ryan? We're just talking about spring training coming up. I don't know. When do you have to report?
Oh, yeah. It's. I have to tell people all the time. Spring training for us isn't actually in the spring. I have to leave. We're already thinking about it now, and then I'll have to leave February 5th. And
Yeah.
there's coaches already there February 1st.
How much
So,
time do you have to spend in the off season, like mapping out? I'm assuming you map out all the meals and everything for all of spring training, or do you do the whole season kind of?
so my responsibility with the major league team is regular season only, and some teams do it different ways. Some teams are in control of everything. Other people's outsource everything completely to another company, say Aramark, Sodexo. There's many companies. We use one called Flick, and they run our facility in Fort Myers, our spring training facility. So it's not just spring training, but it's our Florida facility for rehab, development camps. It's kind of a home base, and a lot of cold weather teams use that heavily because you can't play baseball in Boston right now because it's 15 degrees right now. So that's where most people, if they choose to go there, it's a lot like the Center of Excellence where we had athletes that could choose to go there, but then we prefer they go there, but we have all the services if they go there. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah, pro sports is always weird where it's like, hey, we have all these services, but people still will just like go do their own thing since
Yeah.
they're professional athletes. At the end of the day, it's up to them. So,
Yeah.
so are you pretty much like in contact with the guys in the off season when going over like dietitian stuff, or does that
Yeah.
take a hiatus? It does.
It certainly runs a gamut. There's people that go dark and then I just see them at report day, first day of spring training, where they're required to be there and see how they do. Hopefully they did well. And then other guys that will spend the entire off season in our facility because they get free services and get free treatment and get free meals too. So it runs a gamut from no contact to all kinds of contact and talking with them every week.
Sweet. Well, everybody who's listening, we'll get started. I know you and Ryan don't know each other that well either. So if we want to dive into kind of your background and how you ended up first off in Utah with me, and then
Yeah.
how we ended up going out to the Red Sox, like how you got into all this.
Yeah, it's a winding road, so to speak, but I've always been in my profession interested in food and how that affects people. Whether it's I went to school specifically for culinary and restaurant management, and that's what I thought I would be in, and I ended up doing fair amount of work in that, working in Napa, working in fine dining for several years. But then leaving that and going back to school to get my degree in sports nutrition. And when I got that degree out of the University of Utah, luckily the U.S. ski team is based just north of Salt Lake City in Park City. I went and visited and made some connections, and a job opened up to be not just their nutrition expert, but also their chef. They needed someone with both those skills, and I happened to have those and that interest. So I ended up doing that and spent six years with them. So quite a long time, enough to do 2 Olympic games, and got to meet Brett at the same time and work closely with him, among other coaches, with all the different sports involved with that NGB. So that happened for a while, and then the Red Sox. I happened to go to school with a grad school with a guy who ended up being the dietitian for the New England Patriots. We stayed in touch, and one day he just cold called me and just asked, "Hey, the Red Sox are looking for a chef and dietitian combo. Are you interested?" And I just, love to make connections. To give me an offer, it was a new direction to kind of start a new program, and I went with it. I happened to sign March of 2020, so that was an interesting time to make a change, and dove right head into pandemic world and doing sports, professional sports in that capacity. So yeah, it was definitely interesting doing food service in the pandemic world, but it's its own challenge, and professional baseball has some similarities with Olympic sports, but definitely a lot of differences. So new challenges, and definitely still being challenged to this day.
Yeah, probably a little bit higher budget than when we were with the ski team.
Oh, like orders of magnitude. It's kind of yeah. It's interesting when it's like make sure you stay within budget. And now there is a budget, but keep the guys happy, and it's more of that. And we'll deal with the budget later. I mean, don't be dumb, but yes.
Do you guys do much with the minor league side, or is that kind of just up to the strength coach? It's changed a bunch. And Ryan, you can talk about what you do too. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. The minor leagues have come a long way. I hear stories, and it actually coincides with Brett's experience, and I had the fortunate ability to work with Chris Sale, who Brett knew from his minor league days, I imagine, and then I see him now, and he's told me back in the day it used to just be a jar of peanut butter and some bread, and that was
a
the minor league experience. Yeah,
peanut butter's expensive, man. That was a good day.
Yeah. So budgets have increased, and over time now, they've had certain standards, much like a CBA happens for the major league players. There's a CBA agreement. There's been agreements the last couple of years to have a standard for minor league, and so other teams in general in the MLB have realized that like if you feed the guys, they'll perform better, rather than they just need to figure it out and cut costs. And so I think it's a movement towards all sports to really get the performance model and make that a reality. And so I have a hand in that, but there's a whole different staff that's all in player development.
Got it. Yeah, I can tell you from our experience, the first year it was okay. And then this last year, it really improved on the minor league side. We use like third parties that vendor out for most of our ordering, but our strength coaches still take care of all of that. So it's setting it up on the road and at home. But the budget has definitely increased to the point where it's not like, hey, like here's exactly 30 to 32 pieces of chicken. You only get one. Now it's a little bit more like we don't have to stand there and almost like overwatch to make sure like one guy's not taking too much. It's a much more comfortable experience with the food at this point.
Yeah, it was always a challenge to tell the guys one thing. You need, let's just say, like 150 grams of protein in a day, and what you're serving them is like barely even crossing like 80. So now we're at a point where it's what we're serving is what we're recommending, and so it's like at least we're not really like robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of type thing.
When I was with the Cardinals, it was like 100 or 120 a day or something is what we had for the entire team, for the whole team. And when you're home, we have to feed the umps too. So yeah, it was like just random apples. It was snacks basically. And then when we were at the White Sox, it was better, but still we didn't have enough money to like go out and actually get like a meal from a legitimate place. So I remember one of our athletic trainers was like, we talked to the team. We're like, hey, if you guys are all want to do this together, I'll put it together, but we all have to just like chip in. So literally we had our own like base money that the team would give us. And then all the players would give us like $5 a day when they're on the road to put towards like a big team meal. So like they literally had to pay for it all together. Yeah. It was like subsidized almost. That was it. That was the best we ever had.
Yeah. And even the major league side, it has gone from a dues system where everyone puts in a pot and therefore the players kind of control what they were getting, but they were getting like pizza and the Red Sox are famous for this incident that happened, I think in the 2010s about the chicken and the beer.
Oh yeah.
It's because they just put in the pot and the clubhouse manager just went out and just bought what they told them to get, as opposed to actual dietitians picking something performance-based. So once that happened, eventually the CBA kind of mandated chefs and actual registered dietitians be in charge of the food, but also be provided by the team. So that's why budgets went up and trickle down now. The minor league also has that same budget. So it was fascinating to learn all this history of how things were. While at like the ski team, it was more like, hey, we got to get these guys the best that we can get in this budget. Let's make it happen. You'll have some challenges, make it work. So 2 different models, 2 different challenges, all still a lot of work to make it happen.
Yeah. I know Ryan goes, well, actually, I think I just saw a post about Baltimore Ravens that went through like 20,000 Uncrustables this season. Mm-hmm. Ryan's team has been crushing a bunch of Uncrustables as well.
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys get any Uncrustables in there?
We do, but mainly on the airplane. So what's funny about so to give you a lot of background about what happens on a major league side, I have to think about the meal as soon as they arrive. a meal before the game, a meal after the game, and if they're traveling, what they get on the plane en route to wherever road game they're going to, and then all the catering that happens on the road. There is no chef for the team on the road, so any visiting team in any MLB doesn't really get any fresh cook service at the stadium. You have to cater, and then the logistics for that. And so I call that like organizing a wedding every single day when they're on the road. So it's a lot of logistics. But to go back to your Uncrustables, they have a stock list of things I give them. The plane must have Uncrustables, among other things.
They're important. They're really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Alan, one question I have off of that, when you're like creating your menu, is that something you do week to week, or have you developed a routine, or how do you plan that when the guys are in town?
Yeah, it's this funny double-sided coin that I have to figure out. Like, guys like a routine, but they don't want to see something too frequently. It doesn't make sense when you think about it. It's like an oxymoron, but I have to make sure that they get things that they are familiar with, that they're willing to eat, but it's not too much at the same time. So I could cook filet mignon and lobster every single day, but even then they'll get sick of that. So I have to mix that in. And these guys are simple guys, and so I lean on what I call bro favorites. Like, guys like Italian night, I'll do Italian night. Taco Tuesday is Taco Tuesday on Tuesdays. I have Asian stir fry before the game. I have steakhouse twice sometimes to mix it up. One day with one kind of steak and one kind with another kind of steak. Make sure that there's fish and chicken. So there's a lot of organizing that has to do to make sure that there's variety, but everyone gets what they want every single day, but they still have options. So it's more complicated than it seems.
And you guys have, I think you told me you guys have a garden like at the stadium.
Yeah,
That's
there
sweet.
is. One of the wife of our owner is really into sustainability. Is a foodie herself, and so there's a patch of rooftop garden that's maintained by this local gardener, urban that specializes in urban gardening, and they have things from like green beans to asparagus to strawberries to zucchini, all grown on the roof. Certainly not enough to feed to really feed what we need day to day, but we can get some of that bounty, but that also goes to our luxury boxes too. So we share it among the concession stand food service provider too. But it's up there. It's actually kind of crazy that the people don't know because it's kind of hidden away unless you're in a certain area of the ballpark. But it's pretty cool that exists.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know Tyler Hines right now. He started doing like aeroponics, I think, this last year. But that's a very interesting kind of factoid about Fenway is, hey, there's actually a garden.
Yeah, there is. But when you're gardening, just like anyone who does gardening, you can't get everything you want at the same time. So in like the spring, there's obviously no tomatoes being grown at that time. But then in like July, August, you're swimming in tomatoes. So it's definitely gives you nudges on what you should do seasonally for the menu.
Very cool. I know guys, like you said, they were simple with what they like to eat. What are some of the wildest or most memorable food requests that you've had?
Well, what we in baseball, you have, I think it's up to 30 or maybe more, 40% of our league is either Dominican or Puerto Rican, mainly. Like, we have a big Latin component, Venezuela, there's other countries too, but a lot of athletes are Dominican and Puerto Rican. So I had to really learn the ins and outs of that food. And there are some things I'm just like, wait, you eat that? And okay. And some of the things we cook in other cuisines as well. Oxtail was really huge in Caribbean cooking, but you also see oxtail and similar stuff in ossobuco when in Italy too. So you cook that, and some people are just like, "Oh man, that oxtail! It's like I can't wait. We could eat that every day." I'm like, "Okay." And one other thing I learned is that oftentimes a lot of these Dominican guys would like mashed potatoes for breakfast. I'm like, really? It's like, okay. And then you offer it and then they eat it. And I'm like, all right, okay. I don't know what's up from down, left to right anymore. I just have to just listen and just provide.
Dude, we had a kid, a Dominican catcher. I remember he was like 17, and I watched him just go to like the buffet line that we had in spring training. And one day, apparently he did this every day, but I just noticed it one day. He just filled his plate up with croutons and just poured ranch dressing on top of it. Like that's all the guys were like, yeah, he eats that every day. Wasn't the most in shape catcher.
Yeah.
Like that. And then you're talking about oxtail too. I remember I didn't even know. And I feel like I eat out like weird food sometimes. And I didn't even really have never tried oxtail until we were in Pyeongchang when I was stuck at the freestyle area that you drove me to a bunch of times.
Yes.
And I was stuck there all day because I had multiple team events. And remember that like buffet over there? It's like they had oxtail and then they had like Korean cookies and like that's it. Like that was it. I lived off of for like 3 weeks.
That was probably the most remote place too. And so yeah, I remember that. I was like, is there an American area? There's no. That's the food.
My favorite story about that is when Alan had a van. And there was like no other way to get around. So Alan, lucky enough, he'd drive me random places when he had to go too. And in Korea, they have it set up where like if you get a speeding ticket from like they just have cameras set up. It'll like alert you in your car. It'll be like doo doo, and it'll be like you got a speeding ticket, and it just goes to whoever's registered for the car, which was the U.S. ski team. And I think it was like every day there'd be like 2 or 3 times you got a speeding ticket. You're like, yeah, Troy told me it didn't matter. So he's just like flying down these roads, like boop, boop, got another speeding ticket. Boop, boop, got another speeding ticket.
Like once I found out there was like there was like a forgiveness or just a general forgiveness for any foreigners during the Olympics on all tickets. It felt like I was like one of those guys with like a diplomat license plate. I'm like, do laws apply here? Yeah. Also, I need to get to some place very quickly, so I will do that first. Ask questions later.
You were there for over a month then, because I know you went before. And you went year before too. Basically, you had to set up multiple kitchens out of, if I remember correctly, they were like literally ski lodges before, or not ski lodges.
A ski shop.
Yeah,
pro shop.
Tell us about that. How you kind of managed all that.
Yeah, the strategy of the U.S. ski team was to make sure to eliminate the possibility that the food in the village is really bad. So historically that came from, I think, the Torino Olympics. You would think Italy would have really good food, but what ended up happening was they didn't have the facility capacity to handle half the world coming in to do an event. So sanitation went down the priority list, and people got sick, and no one wants to get sick to be the determining factor of losing a medal. So after that, the ski team's strategy was to have food operations outside of the athletes' village. And that's why my position was created for Vancouver. And then I was involved in Sochi and Pyeongchang. So in Pyeongchang, just like Sochi, we established the place outside of the village, but that required me to not only find the personnel, but also make a pop-up restaurant in places. Some places were okay. Some places were bed and breakfasts, kind of type chateaus that I could convert into, a place where they can just do catering pretty easy. And other places, the location was good, but they didn't have a cooking area, or it did have like a slight break room that we had to convert into a commercial level kitchen and then turn that into something that would be able to last for a whole month. So there's a lot of, I call it the Kitchen Impossible mixed with America's Greatest Race around the world kind of type of scenario where they like not speak the language or also solve things as they come. It was quite the experience, especially Russia was a little bit more structured in terms of where we could go. And then Pyeongchang, Korea was like, okay, here's a blank canvas, make something happen. And you have limited resources and limited language. So that was a little bit more challenging and definitely something I'll never forget.
Yeah. That whole Olympic Games was just like, you're not allowed to go here, but if you go there, just nobody really says anything, like to go into certain events and stuff. And again, I wasn't at Sochi from talking to everybody that was, they're like, yeah, there was guards with AK-47s at Sochi. So you're not going into those places versus at Pyeongchang. Like, I mean, we got in to see some gold medal matches, multiple. Saw the gold medal curling match by not sneaking in, but walking in,
but just walking
with
in
other teams
with confidence.
With confidence. And there's like screens would pop up with our face because of our badges that says like no access. And like if you just keep walking, they just let you in still.
Yes.
It was just crazy. But I think that was what I was most surprised about going to the Olympics was how unstructured it was. And maybe it was just that Olympics. But Yeah, it's crazy. The amount of planning, I think, and that's maybe one of like the biggest things that probably a lot of young dietitians, young strength coaches, anybody getting into the pro or Olympic setting just doesn't really understand. It's like you have to be able to figure out the logistics of a lot of different stuff, whether it be like how to ship that food over, how to cook the food, like you were saying just now, how like build the kitchens. For us, we literally shipped an entire gym over there and built a whole gym in Korea, and then broke it back down and shipped it back across on boats, which takes like 6 months to ship over, and like so much can go wrong. And as little as like little things. I remember you bringing over a suitcase of sriracha because we had forgotten to put it on the boat. So it's like, it's just crazy stuff. And, talking with young coaches and people that are wanting to get in that industry, I feel like that's something you don't necessarily think about until you're just thrown into that mix and you kind of have to figure it out yourself. But it's crazy.
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting points. It's funny, like I've been in this. It's crazy that I've been in this sports dietitian game for 10 plus years now, because it's like I've learned a couple things. People don't worry about what you're doing. Maybe don't even care about what you're doing if you do it right, because it's so seamless and just in the background it works. But it's the biggest problem when things do happen. So it's like you almost don't get acknowledged, and that's a good thing because things aren't going wrong. Maybe it's the same in the strength and conditioning. It's like the plan's good, you're doing great, people are progressing, it's good. But then when something goes wrong, some injury happens, or something unexpected happens, it's all eyes on you. So it's like it's something that young professionals need to kind of just get their head wrapped around. It's like you might not get that recognition, but it's probably a good thing that things are happening and there's no friction.
Yeah, if players are playing well and they're playing like faster or they're stronger or whatever, nobody really thinks about the strength coaches, which again is, fine. But the second there's like multiple injuries, I feel like it's just like, what the fuck are the strength coaches doing? Which maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard because I also tell young dietitians that nutrition's important, but it's not the main thing. It's a supporting element that lets them do the sport that they're focusing on doing. So it's really interesting that it's you try and think that you're your most important thing, and you are important, but you are not as important as the sport itself. And so it's like we're all pieces of the you look at a watch and you open it up, all these springs fall out. It's like something does something, and if it's not there, then it won't work. And so that's how we approach performance, high performance services in general.
Yes, sir. One thing we were talking about, me and Ryan, were like, I don't know necessarily what the Red Sox do. The Cardinals, when I was with it, didn't do much like as far as blood work goes or anything, but I know some teams are getting into like biomarkers or like even hormones type stuff when it comes to blood work with their athletes. Do you guys do any of that yet?
Yeah, it's a funny thing because, like you said, like we were talking about earlier, players are free to do whatever they want in the off season, and oftentimes either their agents or the strength coaches and other professionals that they work with outside in the off season may tell them to do certain services. Some of them includes blood work, and sometimes they'll include me in on that interpretation and how to do it, continue optimizing that during the season. But you run into roadblocks, whether, like, say this blood test, is it valid and is it useful? Is it telling us something? Or is it too cumbersome, or is it telling us information that isn't useful or counterproductive? So there's a lot of stuff that's on the cutting edge that we might not know about, but there's also some stuff that, like, we don't want to mess with someone's head and make them worry about something that might not actually matter. So there's a lot of things that there's some things that are really clear, like if you're low on iron or if you're low in vitamin D, it's very obvious to fix. If you don't eat too many omega-3s, that could be tested so you can boost that. But there's other things that we're still on so much of the cutting edge. It's like, will it affect things? And my general rule is, if you have the budget, so this is all budget dependent, and it doesn't harm, then why not try it? Because you may have a benefit. If it's too time intensive or too much to think about, or you have to take 10 pills and you have to remember to do all these things to mitigate this, and it may or may not work, then it might not be worth doing. And then if the budget is tight, then you have to think about, okay, what are the big rocks? Don't think about the little rocks. What are the things that you're doing that are making the biggest difference? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they taking a micro nutrient, like a multivitamin, omega-3s, vitamin D, the big hits that will make the biggest difference? And think about the more esoteric stuff as icing on the cake.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I see is just picking the lowest hanging fruit. We have so many guys that come in that sleep like shit. They don't hit their protein requirements. They're not taking a multi or vitamin D or an omega. And they've never tried, and they're really resistant to that change until they start to notice a decrease in performance on field. And we can get either a dietitian or someone in the chef side of the departments to have that conversation with them. But yeah, like these guys learn at their own rate. I mean, we had multiple talks with guys last year that just it didn't click. So we would come up with 3-step plans and make sure that, you know, they're trying to put themselves in the best position possible to stay on field.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's in a very budget dependent situation, but we still provide everything that these guys need for them. So it's interesting how their psychology around nutrition, depending on where they're at in their career, how old they are, where they're coming from, changes as they kind of develop throughout their minor league career and into the majors.
Yeah. And you know, I think we've talked about this, Brett. It's like you want a setback to kind of be a wake-up call for an athlete, but you don't want like such a huge setback where they're like ACL tear or something catastrophic. You want something minor. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I do need to start caring about stuff. And sometimes it's just age, and older athlete will start to care because they kind of see at the end of the road there. But a young athlete, you don't want them to tear their ACL, but sometimes it is something like that. It's like, okay, now I got to worry about this. How do I get back as soon as possible? And it's like, oh, nutrition might help. Doing my rehab might help. Doing strengthening exercises might help. It's kind of it's I think there's a life cycle of an athlete, and the sooner they can fast forward to that, like, oh yeah, this thing helps, the better.
Dude, that's the perfect analogy for. I feel like Lillis was the perfect analogy for that. Being a young athlete coming in and not liking working out and stuff, loving jumping, and then remember tearing his ACL, rehabbing with us, and then obviously won a gold medal, and it's just like taken off. And he might have done that without that. He might have found the gym without that. But that helped him realize how much strength helped him get to that next level. Because he came out of that. I remember we were like 4 months post-op, and like his legs were the same strength. He's like, "Oh, I'm at the numbers I need to be." I was like, "That's because you were so weak like beforehand. Like, you're not where you need to be, man." And so he came back way stronger from that. So yeah, you can see that with the strength side and the nutrition side too. When we were the ski team, there were so many. Maybe it was just because of the population we were with too, but there were so many people that were trying to do like the vegan diet and stuff. And I know right now, like carnivore is super popular, and people are doing like intermittent fasting and all this like different stuff that, again, like maybe on the cutting edge of something that's good. It may not show much research. It might just be popular from freaking Joe Rogan or something. Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with all that? Because you probably have obviously you have a ton of athletes, but if they're, want to do one of these extreme diets, do you just try to supplement like what they're probably going to be missing, or try to actually convince them away from some of that stuff?
Yeah. Different dietitians have different approaches. When we're hiring new dietitians, I ask them, what's your nutrition philosophy? How do you approach sports nutrition? But, personally, what I think is that the human body is like more or less a diesel engine. You can put different kinds of fuel in it and it'll work, but to have it optimal, you can tweak things and make it whatever optimal means. And so I think for different events and different like health outcomes, certain diets might be better. But when we're thinking about just pure performance, it all comes down to, in my opinion, those macronutrients. Are you hitting enough protein to fuel your muscles and grow the muscles if you need them to grow? And do you have enough fuel and carbohydrates to do the fuel and make sure that that muscle gets the fuel to do that movement or action? So how you ever get those protein, whether it comes from meat and carnivore diet or from plant proteins in the vegan diet, your body can still take that and get those gains. And so I think the biggest thing is some of these diets are logistically hard. Like when you go on the road and you're on a carnivore diet, can you find meat at every meal? Can you find meat at breakfast? And things like that. Or on the flip side, can you find gluten-free items in a place that has tons of bread around? Like especially in Europe, that was very difficult to do. It's up to the athlete. I usually give it to them. I'm like, if you want to do this diet and you really believe in it, we'll talk to the pros and cons of each. And if it's logistically feasible, it's my job to help you make that accessible and realistic in real life. Because at the end of the day, you can have a whole diet plan, but if it's not, if you're not following through and not consistent on it, then it doesn't really matter whatever it is. So that's my philosophy. I think there's like different ways to get those same nutrients. It's just whatever works in your world. And I think the world is set up in a certain place where it's the normal American diet is what's available. You have to pick and choose out of it to make the optimal diet for you out of those choices around. Whether it's buying your own protein powder because it works for you, or going to a restaurant and choosing a side of vegetables instead of whatever starch they give you by default. It's up to you to be kind of the CEO of you as an athlete, is what I tell these young athletes.
I think there's a lot of translation between that and training for these guys, in the sense of, like, at the end of the day, this is your choice. We are here to support that and try to make it logistically possible for you. So as a young coach, you want everything to be perfect. And this might be the same way with dietitians, is you want everything to be within your philosophical system, and you want every athlete to adhere to that. And then you get to a point where you realize that's not how things work, especially because this is these guys' career. And there are a lot of different ways to skin a cat. So, if you don't like broccoli and I try to force you to eat broccoli, you might be able to do that and be compliant for like 2 weeks. But after that, like, you're going to revert back to what you're doing. Same thing in the weight room. Like, if you don't want to squat with a bar on your back, like, okay, we have to make some sort of change to be able to elicit the same stimulus that we want. And I think everybody goes through that transition at different rates. But the earlier you can learn to accept that the athlete has autonomy in their decision making, the quicker you're going to understand and see that you're probably going to have better relationships with them.
Yeah. There's a lot of rolling with the punches, because I think it's what I'm seeing now too in the professional realm, and it's probably exists in the university, college athletics, and certainly in different Olympic areas too. It's like you have different opinions in the same room, from the sports medicine department to the strength and conditioning to sports science, perhaps. Then you have the analysts and the analytics people, and then you have the front office and those managers, and then you have the coaches, and everyone hopefully is on the same perspective, but sometimes they aren't. And so it's like, oh, why are we doing all these, strength movements or power movements when we should be working on sports specific movements? And it's kind of the same thing with nutrition too. It's like, oh, we're eating way too much protein, there's no veggies, or why don't I watched this thing on Netflix. We start doing vegan diet? I'm like, all right, okay, let's just get like some agreement and some North Star that we can go towards.
Yeah. I think the best organizations that I've worked for are the organizations where people trust their hires and stay in their lanes, right? Like, we both worked with the ski team, and it was a great organization to work for, I feel like, because for the majority of the time, people did a good job of staying in their lane. Like, the people that hired both of us, like, Troy's not out there telling you like what type of food you need to make or how much protein people need to eat, right? Like, he trusted you to do your job, and like trusted that hire. Like, same thing, gave me the autonomy to write my programs and do my own testing protocols and stuff. I mean, they would like want to see information about it afterwards, right? But if you have everybody chiming in on the same thing, it's I had that issue on a previous team, and it was not fun for us as coaches. So I also just wanted to mention, because I mentioned this earlier before we were recording, I'm drinking a Steak and Shake unsweet tea. So when I'm sitting here, it looks like I'm just drinking a Coke as we're talking about nutrition. Thought I would just make sure everybody knows I'm not a fucking idiot. Sweet, man. Was going to say, I was going to get out of the nutrition weeds for a second, and then talk a little bit about just overall, I don't know, travel and career stuff. You not lived, but traveled all over because of your jobs, but also because your brother worked for Delta, and you guys would just go to random places. I think you ran with the bull twice, isn't that? You've run with the bulls twice now?
No, just once, but he did. Okay. My brother also ran. We both didn't get run over, so that's good, and we both survived.
What was your favorite country, you think, so far that you visited?
Personally, as a foodie or chef or person interested in food, like Japan for sure. That food was always good wherever you went. You go into any place, I'm like, wow, that was really good. There's only 5 seats. How did they make any money? Then you go to somewhere remote, and it's like, oh, good again. It's always good. It's all Japanese food mostly, but it was very, very good. Otherwise, like, I had such a great time in Europe also. It's just like all the foods that you get exposed to in America, like Italian food, it's like the highest level when you go over them. It's like, wow, fresh pasta here, and this is the mushrooms that I've heard about, and that kind of type stuff. So as an enthusiast, I'm always driven by the food, but in terms of scenery too, I mean, like even simply going to like Tahoe, like some of the mountains out in America, it's like nothing to sneeze at either. Really cool stuff as well, and going to places like um, Oregon with the cross country team, like great place. And it's like there's a lot of places within our country that are actually pretty underrated, and I think are really cool too.
Oh yeah, for me, I think when the ski team, like when we'd go visit Saas-Fee, that was just gorgeous. Saas-Fee, Switzerland was unbelievable. Also extremely expensive. And then obviously our times in Southeast Asia was always a good time. I think one of my favorite Allen stories was when we were in Vietnam, and we had those motorbikes, and we were staying in some farm stay. These people that cooked us dinner, and it was some of the best rice I've ever had. And we were staying at literally a rice farm, so you would expect that. But I just remember going through, and we found like a open wet market. And instead of like buying food, Alan just comes back with a butcher knife that he had bought out of.
Oh, it was a machete.
We're in like a village in the middle of nowhere, Vietnam. He just bought a machete from this lady who's currently using it to like chop up raw meat in like a wet market. And then we get back to our motorbikes. It doesn't fit in his storage area, so he has to just put the machete in his cup holder. so then we're just going around, and all of a sudden we lost Alan, didn't know where he was. Look back because he was in the back. He comes pulling up. I think you and Mackenzie were riding together, and you come pulling up, and apparently he had hit like a bump. The machete went flying out, hit him in the leg, I believe.
Yeah, it rested on my leg as it was like hit. It was like, well, I'm not gonna reach down and grab it, but it needs to go somewhere. And
so dropped a machete just off on the road randomly, and then obviously had to go back, pick it up, and fly back to America with this huge machete in your checked bag.
Oh, amazing!
So yeah. A lot of good times there, man.
Yeah, the travel component is really, really cool, and I definitely feel fortunate to be able to do that. And I think for the people that do get to travel, sometimes it can be a bear, but we can just enjoy the process of being in a different place. Certain jobs have that, and if you really like that, seek them out, because not everyone likes to travel, but if you really like to travel, the opportunities are out there.
For sure, man. Cool, guys.
Yeah.
That's all I got to talk about. It was good catching up with you. If you guys like the podcast, like it and share it, so then we'll all be super famous, right? Thanks for listening, Mom.
Yes.